The scent of scorched pheromones and overripe diplomacy clung to the air like wet fabric on metal skin. 12 galactic delegations sat under a dome that shimmered with artificial stars, each faction wrapped in silk, chitin, or translucent plasma robes, depending on species and temperament. Beneath them, in the yawning pit of the arena, the show was about to begin. A drumbeat rolled, hollow and erratic, like a malfunctioning heart. It wasn't percussion, not really. It was the amplified echo of a dying Tharnox crab's last mating rhythm, recorded just before extinction. The slavers said it added authenticity to the blood bout. Floating above the pit, the announcer flickered into view. An exoplasmic orb with too many eyes and a speaker grill embedded in its translucent belly. It vibrated with smugness. Ladies, lords, and larval rulers, welcome to the 8th Intergalactic Blood Bout, sponsored by Vilex Pharmaceuticals, where sentience is negotiable. A roar answered. 1,000 alien throats screeched, chattered, and pulsed in excitement. Betting drones zipped through the stands, calculating odds and printing slips on skin paper that changed hue based on likelihood of death. Tonight's spectacle is a certified grudge match, the orb trilled. The Vraxel brood have brought forth their champion, General Slaver, Predator, cultural icon. And for balance, it sneered, the Earth delegation has submitted a woman. Mirror something. It has soft tissue and anxiety. The camera orbs panned to a shadowed corner, where the Earth box sat nearly empty. No fanfare. No entourages. Just one human diplomat sitting beside a cup of lukewarm synth tea, gently stirring it with the detachment of a funeral mourner. His lapel read Deputy Envoy Harrow, Terran Peripheral Command. He didn't clap. He didn't move. He just blinked once, slowly. The crowd didn't care. They were here for blood. Human blood, specifically. In the center of the pit, cages descended. One by one, child-sized. Metal bars. Shivering inside were 6 Earthborn children, taken during the last raid on the Horner's Bend Agricultural Dome. They weren't crying. Not anymore. They had learned to sit still, to look invisible, the way prey sometimes does when the teeth have stopped chewing but haven't yet withdrawn. The Vraxel champion emerged with ceremonial fanfare. 12 feet of muscle, scales, and a neck like a siege tower. 3 eyes blinked independently. His talons were etched with acidic runes. 2 of his 6 arms cracked knuckles in anticipation. He snarled, and the floor vibrated. This, the orb bellowed, is High Claw Samritan, subjugator of the road dust rings, breaker of 12 spines, and inventor of the war egg omelet. The crowd erupted again, delighted by his culinary savagery. Samritan raised a clawed hand and pointed to the cages. "Let the meat scream when I win," he said, his voice a mix of thunder and molten gravel. Above, in the privateers, the galactic senators laughed, sipped fermented electricity, and placed last-minute wagers. A gelatinous delegate from the Gelvin Mine Bank murmured, "Humans are emotionally inefficient. Too attached to singular units. Predictable under grief. Their military structures degrade when mourning." And yet oddly compelling, added a 3-headed amphibian diplomat. Like a tragic opera composed entirely of errors. A golden light flooded the arena. One final cage descended. This one was empty. The orb's voice crackled, confused. And now the human warrior. She was supposed to be in that. Has anyone seen? A motionless figure appeared at the far end of the pit. Not emerging from a tunnel. Not lowered in a cage. Just standing there. Still. Waiting. Her name wasn't announced. Her entrance music hadn't played. She hadn't registered with the betting drones. She wore no armor, only a matte black bodysuit that clung like silence. Her hair was pulled back into a neat braid. No scars. No smirk. Just eyes that had seen the worst day of her life and made peace with it. The crowd stilled. The betting boards blinked erratically. The orb tried again. Presenting. Earth's representative, Amira Solari. Silence. A slaver in the stands barked, "She's late. Disqualify her." Another shouted, "A meat sack with no exoskin? At least give her a stick." Samritan snorted, "I will make her bones into wind chimes." She walked forward. There was no swagger, no vengeance-filled stride. Just calm, controlled, each step falling precisely into rhythm, like a soldier walking toward an unlit grave and knowing exactly where it lies. She passed the cages. One of the children, the smallest, pressed her face to the bars. Her lips moved. Mira didn't react, but her left hand twitched once. A reflex, like someone remembering how to breathe after forgetting for months. The orb hesitated, then improvised. Due to human flexibility, the combatant will fight with no weapons, no armor, no neural modulations. It leaned into sarcasm. Surely her species' infamous creativity will make up the difference. Laughter. Ugly, wet laughter. The floor shifted. Plates slid apart to form terrain, half slick glass, half shifting gravel. Gravity zones adjusted, simulating lunar drift on one side, magnetic pulse on the other. Sanriton cracked his neck and stretched all 6 arms wide. "Do you wish a head start?" he asked, genuinely curious. Mira tilted her head. "No," she said, voice like frost. "Then beg," he growled. "No. Explain your presence. Are you a martyr? Or deluded?" "No." "Then what are you?" She looked up at him. No smile. No threat. Just a tone that was almost bored. Necessary. Above, Deputy Harrow took a slow sip of his tea, then reached into his coat and quietly pressed send on a folded message cube. One word transmitted: observe. The orb screamed, "Begin." And Mira simply stood. Sanriton lunged. The crowd exploded with anticipation. Cameras zoomed. Poets in press boxes prepared their obituary phrases, elegies for a brave, foolish species. Her death would be quick, educational, and live-streamed to 17 billion systems. But Mira didn't move. Not at first. She waited. She watched. She listened to the rhythm of Sanriton's footfalls, the hiss of shifting plates, the adjustment of gravity just before his leap. Then, at the last nanosecond, she slid left, no wasted energy, no panic, and the brute missed by a hairbreadth. He snarled and spun, claws slicing through air. The crowd gasped. She had moved like a shadow slipping between cracks in time. Sanriton blinked all 3 eyes. "You dodge well." "I studied your tapes," she replied, still not attacking. "You lead with the right elbow. Always." He growled. "You studied for a death?" "No. For yours." She stepped back, only slightly, as if letting him try again. The crowd, once confident, began to murmur. Something felt wrong. The betting drones recalculated. One displayed an impossible statistic: 0.03% survival odds. A Faraxi gambler dropped his drink. "She's not trying to win. She's trying to break him." The orb's voice faltered. Spectacle proceeding as expected. Sanriton charged again. This time, she ducked lower than should have been possible and drove her palm into a pulse point beneath his middle left arm. He stumbled, shocked. That joint had never been touched in combat before. It wasn't even listed in most alien anatomy guides. She followed with a step that shifted her into the altered gravity zone. Her body adjusted as if she trained in magnetic fluctuations since childhood. He gave chase, only to find his bulk drag sideways. She turned mid-drift and said quietly, "You slavers sold 6 children from my colony. One called me mother." The crowd froze. She landed gently and raised her hands. The scene locked in place, suspended between disbelief and revelation. And then, end of act. She said one last thing to the stunned arena. They screamed for help. "You called it commerce. I call it a debt." She smiled. It wasn't friendly. It wasn't cruel. It was just a statement, like a weather report, like the moment a storm realizes it no longer needs to shout. Above, the betting board glitched once, then recalculated the odds. Human, 12%. And rising. The air above the arena shimmered with heat and disbelief. The Vraxel stood still for the first time in a decade, all 6 arms clenched, twitching as if trying to decode what had just happened. Around him, the crowd murmured. Thousands of alien voices layered like a broken choir, the sounds of confusion, recalculation, unease. And Mira? She stood relaxed in the center of it, one foot slightly forward, posture steady, gaze neutral. She didn't look like someone who had narrowly avoided death. She looked like someone waiting for the next part of the plan to arrive. Sanritun's voice boomed from deep within his chest, its growl sharpened by disbelief. You hesitate. Why? Mira tilted her head. I don't. You're just slow. The crowd gasped, 100 languages, one emotion. No one spoke to the Vraxel like that. Not the senators. Not the generals. And certainly not a barefoot human woman standing in synthetic cloth, with no backup and no apparent weapons. Sanritun flexed his claws, lowering himself into a stance reserved for real threats. I have torn stronger creatures in half. I've read your battle logs, Mira replied. Every engagement was against unarmed opponents. You fight like a throne, loud, heavy, and dependent on others to carry you. In the slaver box, an official leaned toward his companion and whispered, She's provoking him. Why? Asked the companion, part crystalline, part moss. Because she wants him to think. Mira exhaled once through her nose. The crowd thought it was amusement. It wasn't. It was measurement. Her pulse rate was still low. Her muscles still loose. Her neural nodes were quiet, dormant. She hadn't activated anything yet. Not the embedded reflex tree. Not the predictive cascade buried beneath her spine. That would come later, if it needed to come at all. Sanritun roared and lunged again, arms blurring, claws whistling through the thickened air. Mira moved differently this time. Not dodging, not countering. She simply wasn't where he expected. A subtle sidestep. A foot planted at an angle. A slip of balance. She didn't push, she allowed him to miss. He crashed into the arena wall, stone cracking beneath his weight. When he turned, her back was to him. He charged. She didn't turn. She just whispered something he couldn't hear, and then dropped low. One arm swept behind her, clipped his lead ankle with surgical precision, and he stumbled forward, roaring, scrambling to stay upright. The crowd had stopped cheering. There was no glory in watching a god trip. Sanritun wheeled back and shouted, You insult me with your restraint. Mira turned, finally. You mistake mercy for calculation. That's when the betting boards began to stutter. 17% now. Then 19.2%. The numbers had begun to climb. Delegates sat straighter. A Zanari general whispered, The human is analyzing him, rewriting the fight in real time. Deputy Envoy Harrow, still sipping from his tea in the upper diplomat box, placed his cup down with exaggerated care. They still haven't learned, he muttered, to no one in particular. Our rage is never loud. In the arena, Mira finally adjusted her stance. A single shift of her left foot, the smallest of changes, but for anyone watching closely, it was the first offensive position she'd taken. Sanritun noticed. You ready to die now? No, she said. I'm ready to win. He moved again, his full body mass, his war cry echoing, claws extended, the arc of his leap perfect in form, beautiful in its brutality. Mira stepped forward. One motion. Timed. She met him not with resistance, but redirection. Her shoulder caught his midsection. Her knee shifted his balance, and his entire momentum worked against him. He was airborne again, but not the way he'd planned. He hit the ground hard. Mira stood over him before he could rise. One hand reached out, not to strike, not to injure, but to touch. She placed two fingers gently behind his leftmost eye, just above the nerve crest. A death point. She didn't apply pressure. She just showed that she knew where it was. You're wondering how a mother got here, she said quietly. How someone like me breached your slaver lines, bypassed your biometrics, walked into your highest ring. Sanritun snarled, but didn't move. She knelt beside him. I'll tell you, she said. Because you don't believe we fight. You think humans plead, cry, mourn. You think our grief is soft. The crowd hung on every word, the camera zooming so close her eyes filled every screen in the system. She didn't blink. But the truth is, our grief hardens. Our mourning sharpens. You stole our children. And in doing so, you created something far worse than a soldier. You created purpose. One of the slaver senators muttered into a comm link, "Activate the failsafes. Cut the broadcast." But the signal refused to obey. Someone had rerouted the stream. The entire Galactic Corps was watching now. Billions of eyes. Sanritan shoved up from the ground, furious, humiliated, terrified in a way he didn't yet understand. Mira let him rise, and smiled. It wasn't a wide grin, just the briefest curve of one corner of her mouth. But it landed like a missile. The children in the cages had seen that smile before. On Holos, in bedtime stories, in the shape of drawings they tried to recreate while remembering Earth. The oldest of them, barely 10, pressed her forehead to the cage bars and whispered, "Mama's here." Mira took a step back. Sanritan screamed and charged again. She didn't move until the last possible instant. Not out of fear, but out of intent. She wanted him to be committed. She wanted his trajectory sealed. Then she moved, not back, but through his motion. Her hand shot up beneath his central chest plate. A flash of pressure. A nerve pinch designed not to kill, but to immobilize. His muscles locked. His breathing stuttered. He crashed to the ground like a felled monument. She stood over him again. But now there was no restraint. No calculated mercy. "You sell children like grain," she said. "You market screams as flavor." The crowd didn't make a sound. She looked to the sky dome above. Her voice rose, not loud, not angry, just sure. "You've mistaken quiet for weakness. You've mistaken love for softness." She crouched down, met Sanritan's frozen gaze. "You've mistaken me for someone who needed your permission." Then she stood, and for the first time, truly smiled. The announcer orb was speechless. Its lenses blinked out of sync, static buzzing across its speaker. "Ladies, lords, and larval things," it stammered. That was, we believe, unorthodox, possibly a foul. But no one was listening. In the upper tiers, several slaver lords had begun arguing, not with each other, but with their own doubts. The old certainty that humans were predictable, manageable, docile, was bleeding away. Deputy Harrow rose from his chair, dusted imaginary lint from his lapel, and whispered into his wrist console. Phase 2. Begin asset retrieval. Slaver protocols will break within the hour. Back in the pit, Mira turned to the cages. With a flick of her fingers, a coded neural pulse snapped across the arena. The locks disengaged. One by one, the doors hissed open. The children didn't rush out. They waited. One girl stepped forward, eyes wide, unsure. Mira knelt, arms open. The girl ran to her. The rest followed. Sanritan tried to speak, his throat catching. Mira looked back at him once more. "If you live," she said, "remember what you saw, and remember this truth." She reached for the girl's hand, and they began walking across the arena together. "We may come quietly, but we never come alone." Behind her, the betting odds froze. Human, 100%. Next to it, disqualified, every assumption. The signal cut to black. The arena reconfigured around them with a low, grinding shudder. Stone plates slid apart to reveal sleek metallic veins beneath, and sections of the floor floated, rearranging into uneven, hovering battlegrounds. Gravity distorted in rhythmic pulses, shifting from light to crushing, a breathless heartbeat engineered to disorient. The spectators cheered, not out of understanding, but anticipation. Pain, confusion, spectacle. That was the formula. Sanritan stood, now wary. The human was no longer an oddity. She was a variable. Worse, an unknown one. His eyes flicked across the terrain. Elevated ridges, magnetic pulses, zero-gravity corridors. He'd trained for them, lived them, killed in them. Mira didn't move. She watched him like a botanist might observe a slowly dying vine, puzzled by its insistence on continuing to twist toward sunlight, even as its roots were ash. Sanritan growled low. "This ground is my domain." Mira said nothing. She adjusted the weight on her heels. A small gesture, but it spoke volumes. She had already mapped the arena, cataloged the shifting zones, calculated probable failure margins for each surface. The announcer's voice returned, forced and shaky. Combat continues in Phase 2. Adjustments include zero-gravity quadrants, rotating platforms, and, of course, localized anti-thought fog. Who will emerge dominant? The betting boards blinked, then flickered to a strange stasis. Odds refused to adjust. Statistical models failed to predict outcomes. A Galactic data merchant slithered from his booth and vomited sparks. It had never happened before. Sanriton leapt. This time he aimed not at Mira, but at a platform above her, arcing across the field to shift perspective and rain force from above. It was smart, predictable, trained. He was treating her as an equal now, which was a mistake. She didn't dodge. Instead, she stepped into the low-gravity zone at the edge of the platform, slowing time, not literally, but perceptually. Her muscles flexed in controlled micro-movements. Her arms bent. A single breath moved through her body like a command through an army. When Sanriton landed with both fists crashing downward, Mira caught him, not directly, not stupidly, but by letting his momentum strike where she had been, not where she was. Her position shifted a hand width to the left. Her elbow came up under his left shoulder, and she twisted, hard. The sound was wet and immediate. One of his arms hung limp. He screamed, more in surprise than pain. Mira stepped back, not retreating, calculating. You were taught to overpower, she said calmly. But your training made you lazy. You've never needed to think. You insult my lineage. I insult your over-reliance on it. He roared, lunged again with 4 remaining arms, striking in tandem, attempting to pin her within a shrinking zone of magnetic turbulence. Mira entered it deliberately. Her body shimmered slightly as the magnetic field engaged. The crowd expected collapse. Human biology didn't fare well in such zones. But Mira didn't collapse. She smiled. The signal interference caused her hair to rise slightly. Her fingers crackled. And then she activated something they couldn't see. The field surged, then went dead. Several aliens gasped. The Galactic merchant screeched, impossible. You can't negate. But she had. Sanriton's swing lost force in that split instant. Mira dropped low, planted her foot, and drove a fist into the soft underside of his jaw. It was not a killing blow. It was a warning written in precision. He stumbled. Blood green, thick, too bright, spattered onto the arena floor. Above them, several slaver lords began arguing across channels. She's modified. She's cheating. This match is void. She's Earth military. Deputy Envoy Harrow adjusted his cuffs and said aloud, she's Earth family. The announcer made a sound between a chuckle and a short circuit. What a spirited exchange. Let's remember, combat remains non-lethal until it isn't. Sanriton was breathing harder now. His movement slowed ever so slightly. A micro delay between muscle intention and execution. Mira caught it. You're tiring. You do not understand my biology. I understand physics. And I know when weight begins to lie to itself. He struck again. She didn't counter. She shifted. Every move Mira made was a sum of intention, geometry, and memory. She didn't dodge, she replaced space. One step ahead of contact. One pivot ahead of force. A phantom draped in mass and discipline. Sanriton lunged once more, throwing all his weight into a final assault. He overreached. She was already beneath him. Her foot slid forward on the magnetic ridge. Her fingers grazed the bone notch behind his secondary lung. She said very softly, you forgot the math. Then her elbow drove up. The impact sent a shock through the entire arena floor. Sanriton collapsed, not unconscious, but frozen. Body systems disrupted. Mind overloaded by pain signals his redundant brains couldn't process fast enough. He tried to rise. Couldn't. Mira stood over him. Not smug. Not furious. She was silent. Composed. I didn't come here to kill you, she said. I came to teach you what happens when you assign value to screams. The cameras zoomed in. The children, still by the unlocked cages, stood watching. Eyes wide. Breathing shallow. They didn't cry. They hadn't for days. But now they began to lean forward just slightly, as if realizing they were watching something that might make them feel safe again. Above, the diplomatic tiers buzzed with chaos. Some demanded intervention. Others whispered about negotiations. A few quietly began deleting their slaver contracts or transferring funds to anonymous accounts, just in case. Deputy Harrow leaned forward and tapped the side of his console. A new signal sent. Across the stars, ships adjusted course. Sanriton groaned from a floor. "You don't win just by standing." "I haven't stood still once," Mira said. "You just couldn't keep up." She turned away. Behind her, he surged up one last time, claws slashing from behind, animal instinct, not warrior reflex. Mira caught the motion without looking. She spun, planted both feet, and slammed a palm flat against his chest with enough force to crack his exoskeletal plating. Sanriton dropped and didn't rise again. The arena didn't cheer. It couldn't. Something had shifted. The audience, alien or otherwise, had stopped watching a match and started watching a message. Mira knelt briefly beside the fallen champion. She didn't gloat. Instead, she whispered, "This isn't vengeance. It's warning." The cameras caught every word. Then she stood. Her eyes scanned the upper tiers, the lords, the diplomats, the Warfang syndicates, and smiled again. It was the smile that changed everything. Because it didn't say, "I won." It said, "I'm not done." The lights dimmed. The betting boards crashed. The arena shut down. An emergency override triggered by systems that didn't recognize the outcome. But Mira remained, centered in the silence, surrounded by the children, who now walked toward her as if pulled by gravity they trusted more than any law. Behind her, the defeated Vraxel twitched once, then was still. And above them all, in the darkening air, the galactic powers began to do the only thing more dangerous than fighting. They started to think. The arena lights dimmed to a shuddering twilight as emergency protocols engaged, casting the shattered field in hues of red and trembling gold. Across the tiers, diplomats, slaver lords, and high-shelled syndicate brokers erupted into chaos. Some shouted into translation orbs, demanding a reset. Others scribbled new treaties midair, voices thick with panic. A few simply sat, mute and blinking, as if the rules of the universe had blinked out of existence the moment a human mother dropped a champion. Mira stood unmoved. The children surrounded her now, silent, watchful, shadows pressed against her sides. They didn't touch her, not yet. Not because they feared her, but because something in them still couldn't believe she was real. Hope, after long starvation, takes time to feel safe in the mouth. A security drone hovered low, scanning her vitals. It sputtered, confused by the neural feedback. Traces of military-grade control protocols, biological dampeners long thought decommissioned. Then it blinked once and shut itself down, too overwhelmed to argue with reality. Far above, Deputy Envoy Harrow finished his tea. He adjusted his coat, stepped forward to the center of the diplomatic tier, and tapped once on his wrist. A quiet chime rang out, not loud, but authoritative. The screaming paused. One by one, the delegates turned toward him, not because of his title, but because Earth didn't usually send anyone. And when they did, they didn't interrupt. Harrow let the silence grow teeth before speaking. "You've just witnessed a demonstration," he said, voice dry and surgical. "Not of our weapons, not of our fleet strength, not even of our emotional endurance." A ripple moved through the crowd. He continued, "What you witnessed was a mother. And I would advise, very strongly, that you begin rewriting your policies accordingly." A slug-like trade minister gurgled. This was unsanctioned. She was unregistered. "It's a violation of the gladiatorial compact." Harrow raised a single brow. So was the auctioning of minors. And yet here we are. But she interfered with slaver law. She enforced a higher one. In the pit below, Mira turned her head slightly, eyes angled up toward him. She didn't smile. Not yet. But she knew the timing was good. "Earth," Harrow went on, "has long endured your condescension. We've accepted the snickers in your courts, the betting slurs in your brothels, the footnotes in your histories. You believed we were too young to matter, too tender to retaliate." He stepped forward. You confused kindness with frailty. A fatal mistake. A dozen ambassadors opened diplomatic channels, whispering frantic amendments to open agreements. Several syndicates disconnected entirely, retreating into shadow space. Below, Mira knelt beside the children and said softly, "This part will be loud." And loud it became. A scream tore across the main comms, a noise not organic, but technical. The death rattle of 20 orbital satellites collapsing at once. Then came the warping boom of mass drives entering proximity. Overhead, the arena's sky dome flickered. One by one, ships decloaked. Human. Hundreds of them. Not battleships. No. Worse. Rescue corvettes. Diplomatic barges. Medical fleets. Mobile courts. With full press coverage. Every ship streaming live to every corner of the galactic net. Harrow didn't blink. We brought witnesses. A scarred reptilian admiral rose from his perch. "You're violating peace." "No," Harrow said. "You broke it the day you paraded our children in cages. We're simply filing the correction." A flurry of protest erupted, but it was a dying wind, panicked and dry. The slaver lords began to vanish from their seats, some fleeing via private transporters, others issuing denials before the broadcast sealed their faces into infamy. One tried to fire a silencing beam at Harrow, but it dissolved mid-air, intercepted by a quiet tremble in the diplomatic shielding. Harrow turned his eyes back to Mira, who stood now, with all 6 children gathered close. Her eyes were unreadable, but her posture had softened just slightly. The storm behind her ribs was easing into something slower. Not peace, but the beginning of it. A command chimed through the diplomatic systems. Initiate Galactic Tribunal Protocol 7. Emergency review of human grievance submission. No one objected. Not this time. In the arena, a rusted gate cracked open on the far wall. A procession of Earth officials stepped in, half lawyers, half soldiers, all wearing the calm, dangerous faces of those who had waited too long for justice. A judge in gray approached Mira and bowed, not low, but honest. She bowed back. The children were escorted out first, one by one, wrapped in small solar cloaks, protected by shields as gentle as breath. None of them looked back, not because they didn't want to, but because they knew she would follow. And she did. Mira turned once toward the center of the arena, the imprint of her fight still visible, the cracked tiles, the crushed edge of the magnetic plates, the bloodless silhouette where her final blow had landed. She said nothing to it. The past does not need a speech. Instead, she walked forward, the sound of her steps measured and clean. Above, Harrow watched her go, then looked down at the empty stands, the flickering remains of galactic certainty trembling beneath emergency lights. "She'll need a new ship," he said to no one. A junior officer nearby blinked. "Sir." Harrow looked tired now, but amused. Mira Solari just forced a multi-system slaver ring into collapse. She walked into the deepest blood sport in recorded history, rescued stolen children, dismantled the concept of species hierarchy, and did it all in under an hour. The officer swallowed. "Yes, sir." "She'll need a new ship," Harrow repeated, "and a name for it." From somewhere far above the arena, a single message flashed across the galactic network. Origin unknown, but the source unmistakable. Earth does not forgive the theft of its young. Earth does not forget who traded them. Earth is coming. The final act began not with war, but with an inbox. Thousands of galactic officials, ministers, traders, auctioneers, private bidders, received identical messages. Subject, pending investigation. Attachments, evidence chains. Audio, video, confession. Signatory, Human Civil Tribunal. And then another. Subject, you saw her. We suggest you stop running. Inside a slaver stronghold on the outer edge of Zorak Prime, a hooded figure pressed pause on the footage of Myra's final blow. He leaned back, exhaled. "Start the engines," he said. "We're going to need a longer exile." In a quiet chamber on a world with no name, a child held a sketchpad and drew a woman standing in front of a cage. The crayon didn't get the face right, but the smile was exact. Somewhere deep in the cold corners of space, A species that once laughed at humans sat in silence, listening to the echo of their own fear. And aboard the Earth Tribunal ship Vigilance in Bloom, Mira stood by a viewport, watching the stars. The children were asleep. Her uniform had been returned to her, neatly pressed, symbols removed. She was no longer a soldier. That part of her had ended. But the mission had never really needed one. It only needed a mother who knew how to fight. She sipped real tea, not the scent kind. Real leaves, earth-grown. A soft beep announced a message. She opened it. It read, "Mira, your next assignment is optional." But they took more than 6. And not all of them are in cages. Some are still waiting. She set the cup down. Didn't answer right away. Her reflection stared back at her from the window, quiet and strong. She didn't smile this time, but she did nod. And far behind her, Earth began writing a new chapter, one that started with grief, was sharpened by love, and would be carried into every system that had once thought kindness could be caged. Mira turned, adjusted her coat, and walked toward the command deck. There was still work to do.